Good morning. This is your Saturday morning update on Hurricane Ida. I'm Dave Jones, meteorologist with Storm Center Communications and GeoCollaborate. This is a update based on the National Hurricane Center's 11 a.m. update for the Fleet Response Working Group Sensitive Information Sharing Environment that gets posted on the GeoCollaborate dashboard for further reference. It looks like Ida is beginning to really take shape now as winds have increased to 85 miles per hour. You can see on the satellite image that it's looking like a more formidable storm as it emerged last night off the western tip of Cuba. It had a little bit of punch to it, or punch given to it, which it had to get rid of. And now it's over very, very warm waters, and the atmospheric conditions are much more friendly for Ida to strengthen rapidly. Hurricane Hunter aircraft are investigating the storm right now. They're flying through it. Can you imagine being on that aircraft as those dedicated NOAA scientists and also U.S. Air Force personnel in the C-130s fly through this storm just to get you and me more information to go into numerical weather prediction models to make them more accurate. We need that accuracy because wherever that storm makes landfall, it's going to drive a lot of water from 150 miles to the east of that eye and create a lot of storm surge. But you can see that it's starting to perhaps get an eye about it. You can see right around the center here, it's starting to clear out just a little bit, which means the air is descending inside of the eye. This is basically an atmospheric engine, and it eats and feeds on the warm ocean temperatures, but it needs a friendly environment in order to evacuate the air out of the hurricane. So that's where we get evacuation out of the outside at the upper levels, and then the air sinks on the inside, which dries the atmosphere out and makes the eye. It clears it up and gives it clear skies. In intense hurricanes, you can look right from the ground straight up through the eye. You might remember some previous videos of that with some intense hurricanes. But you can see what else is going on. You can see thunderstorms that are forming on the outside. And look, they're starting to perhaps impact or get close to impacting part of the coastline here. These are thunderstorms with strong gusty winds on the outflow of the hurricane. And Ida is also getting close to impacting with some storms. And this outer band also is kind of feeding up and impacting South Florida. So the storm is getting wider. The wind field is getting broader. But I also want to show you that I'm going to go right over here to the east a little bit because, well, it's off this satellite image, so I won't go off to the east a little bit, but I'll go over to GeoCollaborate. And GeoCollaborate, and I'll back out just to show you what I'm talking about. We have very active tropics, folks. Look at this. Over on the west coast, we have Hurricane Nora, a Category 1 storm. The U.S. Air Force is flying through that one as well to get measurements. And we have potential Tropical Storm Julian. Julian is the next one in the named storms for the year. It looks like the Hurricane Center is forecasting it to briefly reach tropical storm status and then dissipate in the cooler waters. Here's Bermuda, just for reference. So it's way out here, but it is impacting shipping lanes and traffic to and from Europe with goods and services. So let's focus on the big story at hand, and that is Hurricane Ida. Ida now has 85 mile per hour winds. And I want to point something out here that is really important. Notice the tropical storm force winds. That's the area in yellow here. Okay, we have some hurricane force winds that are showing up here now, and on the right-hand side of the storm. As they wrap around the storm, it's going to intensify pretty rapidly. But the point I want to make here is this is how wide the tropical storm force winds are. Look how wide the cone is. The cone is not a damage path. Do not look at the Hurricane Center's forecast and all the TV meteorologists that you see and see that cone and say, oh, look, we're not in the cone in eastern Louisiana. We're not in the cone, thank goodness. That is not accurate. That is not accurate. This storm has a very wide wind field, and when it moves up towards Louisiana, it's going to expand even more. So all the cone tells you is that this is the likelihood, the forecast path in which the center of the center is going to pass within 65 miles of that cone. So it could pass just outside of the cone. The center could pass outside of the cone this way. So you folks in Cameron, Louisiana, need to pay very close attention to the path of this storm, as I'm sure you are, because of your last year's experiences with Laura and so many others. But Ida is forecast to become a major hurricane by this evening and continue to intensify to a Category 4 with 125 mile per hour winds before it makes landfall during the early afternoon tomorrow. Now, just because the meteorologists classify a landfalling hurricane as the eye wall passing over land and the center of the storm passing over land, so the center of the eye. But that doesn't mean anything for you and me who are living in southern Louisiana who say, oh, good, I have until tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. No. Look how wide the wind field is. The wind field is going to precede the storm's landfall by 12 hours, perhaps, or more. So you really want to think about, when are those winds going to arrive, so I can make sure I'm hunkered down by that time. And I want to show you that because we have a arrival of tropical storm force winds graphic that is updated by the National Hurricane Center with every update they make, with the official update. So this is the 11 a.m. updated forecast for the arrival of tropical storm force winds. Now, Sunday at 2 a.m., they're just beginning to touch the extreme southern part where the Mississippi comes out into the Gulf of Mexico. But I'm going to get closer here because I want you to pay attention to these wind forecasts. By Sunday morning at 8 a.m., tropical storm force winds are knocking on the door of downtown New Orleans. So my advice for all of you involved in the Fleet Response Working Group, the sensitive information sharing environment, first of all, follow the Hurricane Center and their updates constantly. Number two, make sure you take the likeliest time where the tropical storm force winds are going to arrive. So let's say right here, it's 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, and subtract 6 hours. Make sure all your plans are done and you are hunkered down or evacuating by 2 a.m. on Sunday. So really, sound advice is by midnight tonight. You have no more time after that, because when things go downhill, they can go downhill quickly. And it also means that feeder bands ahead of the storm could kick off very gusty winds, very heavy downpours, and cause localized flooding. When the main part of Ida arrives in southeast Louisiana, it is going to be very, very windy, very stormy, and rain like you've probably have never seen before. It's going to be very heavy, probably at the rate of 2 to 3 inches or more per hour. And the pumps in New Orleans are going to have to work overtime to minimize the amount of flooding within the levee walls. And there is not a mandatory evacuation for anyone within the levee system of New Orleans or southern Louisiana. There are mandatory evacuations if you live outside of that levee system, because the storm surge could be so high it could overtop some of the levee systems, particularly south of New Orleans. So this is the arrival of tropical storm force winds. For those of you in Alexandria, Louisiana, central Louisiana, Lafayette, Lake Charles, the tropical storm force winds will have arrived by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday, 8 p.m. on Sunday for central Louisiana, and then tropical storm force winds. Let me back out just a little bit here. Tropical storm force winds after 8 o'clock Sunday north of this track. Okay? So it looks like the storm is going to be a depression. It's forecast to be a depression by the time it gets to the northeastern Louisiana, Mississippi border. So it should be a tropical depression, but that does not minimize the rainfall impacts at all and strong gusty winds that could develop inside of thunderstorms. There's also going to be a threat for tornadoes to the east side of where the eye moves. So pay attention to that. There are likely to be tornado watches issued, and I can turn on all of the watches, warnings, and advisories that the National Hurricane Center has issued. And so there are flood watches in effect all throughout here. That's what this green area is. Flood watches all the way up to here. There's also this tan area, which is a tropical storm warning. So tropical storm warnings extend all the way into northern Louisiana. And there are special tropical cyclone statements that are happening as well. And so that means that you are in for very stormy weather where the center and about 150 miles on either side of that storm of Ida moves inland. Okay, so there are hurricane warnings in effect all along the coastline here. So today is the last day you have to make preparations. I want to say some words also about inland flooding. Let me turn off the arrival of tropical storm force winds. Let me turn off the watches, warnings, and advisories from the National Weather Service. I can show you quickly the radar, the weather radar data, which I've just turned on, and you can see that there's some showers and storms across southern Louisiana. That is indirectly associated with Ida. There is outflow that's causing some storms out here, but there is also, it's interacting with a little tropical wave disturbance where these showers are going to be drifting along the coastline. That happened yesterday as well. So I'll turn off the weather radar. The storm is just a little bit too far out to get weather radar data from the land-based National Weather Service radars. But we are watching the data by other spaceborne radar platforms, such as the Global Precipitation Measurement Mission from NASA. But I want to show you the forecast for the rainfall amounts. And this is, I showed this yesterday. Some people seem to really like this visualization, and I'll change the transparency here a little bit. This is a view of how much rain. The National Weather Service has a number of different centers. This comes from the Weather Prediction Center. They're based in College Park, Maryland. Their job is to handle the forecast for how much rain is going to be falling when a storm makes landfall. So responsibility transfers from the National Hurricane Center to the Weather Prediction Center when it comes to rainfall amounts. And so the Weather Prediction Center is predicting a lot of rain. Matter of fact, there's this whole contour here is 10 inches. See that? 10 inches over a 7-day period. But you can bet the majority of that is expected to fall because of Hurricane Ida. There are other bullseyes in the middle here in southern Louisiana that could be isolated. 15 to 20 inches of rain could fall. Now, the pumps in Louisiana, I believe I mentioned in my update yesterday that they could handle 1/2 inch of rain per hour. I believe it's 1 inch of rain per hour that they can handle pumping out of the city. If they get 3 or 4 inches of rain per hour from this storm and end up getting 15 inches of rain over a 6 or 7 hour period, we're going to have flooding in downtown New Orleans. The question is, will the pumps hold up? Will they be able to pump out all the water that's going to be falling from the sky? And will the levee system hold up to make sure that there are no breaches in the levee system because of Ida's path and winds? Now, one piece of little promising news is that the latest hurricane models, and I'm not going to show hurricane models here, that's for other people to show, are showing a tendency to maybe not want to take Ida to a Category 4. That's that's just minimal solace because the storm is expected to be a major hurricane when it makes landfall. It brings the category of winds perhaps down, although winds could gust in this hurricane up to Category 4. But at least it might be the start of some sort of trend showing that perhaps Ida may not strengthen as much as earlier anticipated. It's still going to be a major hurricane. All of you in this area for forecast landfall of the center of the storm need to finish your preparations today and be prepared for major flooding. And I'm going to shift up here to the north a little bit because that major flooding follows this path right up through Mississippi. Those of you living in Mississippi need to prepare for major flooding in the rivers, streams, and tributaries. If you live near any that you think are going to flood, you need to think about somewhere else to go. And then this path continues up with some heavy rainfall expected. This is a 3-inch contour, so 4 to 5, perhaps 6 inches of rain could fall in central and western Tennessee. That includes areas like Waverly, Tennessee, where you experienced historic flooding last weekend. 17 inches of rain and 20 people were killed because of those flash floods. There's a lot of debris that still needs to be picked up, and a lot of rain could fall again. So please, if you think that you're vulnerable, you need to get out of the areas where you think may flood should these rains evolve. And the local National Weather Service office in your area will keep you updated. And if you have NOAA weather radio, I suggest that you turn it on. Make sure that you have your batteries in the NOAA weather radio, and it will alert you when flash flood warnings are issued. So that's the story for the rainfall and the expected landfall of Ida. Once again, expected and currently forecast to make landfall as a Category 4 hurricane. That's a major hurricane with winds up to 130 miles per hour. And so as Ida gets a little bit more organized, and I'll go back here to the satellite picture, it is looking like it's intensifying. You can see the banding structure. You can see almost an eye forming. So over the next 6 to 12 hours, we're going to see some rapid intensification going on within this storm. I'll show you also one more time. I'll back out here and just show you. I'll turn off the quantitative precipitation forecast. That's just meteorological garbage or jargon for how much rain might fall over the next several days. But I want to turn on the area 2 for major impacts expected during the day tomorrow. This area is severe thunderstorm impacts because of Ida. And this red area is flash flooding that is likely. So it's kind of what I've been talking about. Notice that the severe thunderstorm area is to the right primarily of the track of the center of the storm, the forecast storm. And the flash flood areas go around the storm itself because there's going to be very strong winds and heavy rain, probably for 130, 150 miles on either side of the center of that storm. Notice that severe thunderstorms and the flooding area are well outside of the cone. They're outside of the cone. So the cone is not a damage path. Okay, so I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to turn on, let's see, what was I going to turn on? I'm going to turn on significant river flooding outlook from the Weather Prediction Center. These are areas where significant river flooding is anticipated. So let me just zoom into this for a second, because if you live in these areas, that means significant flooding is expected to occur. And look at it right in the middle of this high, very likely area is New Orleans, right in the middle. So significant flooding is likely. If you live in an area that you think might flood and you're within the levee walls, make sure you can go higher or you can go upstairs, and make sure that you have a way to get out of your house if you need to, in case the flooding is severe. So I'm going to back up here a little bit and just point out once again how wide the tropical storm force winds are. I'm going to do another update later this afternoon. We're going to bring someone that I'm going to talk to a little bit from Louisiana and ask a few questions about logistics and working with the private sector and what kind of information do you need. That's going to be very helpful to the Fleet Response Working Group and the sensitive information sharing environment. So that does it for me today. I'm Dave Jones with Storm Center Communications. Thank you for watching this update. There'll be more of them during the day today. I don't know exactly when they'll be because it depends on how much information I get and if I can put together something that has reasonable information in it that can be used by those of you watching this video. So if I don't update before 5 o'clock or 6, the next update will be at 6 o'clock Eastern Time after the official Hurricane Center's update, but there may be one before that. Thanks so much for watching. Stay safe if you are along the Gulf Coast. Listen to evacuation warnings. If you have voluntary evacuation orders in place, think about leaving. Think about leaving. Once the storm gets underway, rescuers cannot come out in the hurricane force winds to try to save you. It puts them in danger and the lives of all the responders in danger. So please think about leaving if you are in voluntary evacuation area. Thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to you a little bit later this afternoon.